Welcome back, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. Today's lesson is going to be about psychological health. So just so that we are clear, psychological health is a synonymous term to mental health. So we probably hear the term mental health more often, but they're the exact same thing. So how do we define psychological health? So this is the sum of how we think, how we feel, how we relate, and how we exist in our day-to-day lives. Another way to look at it is through the wellness wheel. So this should look familiar to you because you've seen this a few times now. But we have, how do we think? That's our intellectual health. How do we feel? That's our emotional health. How do we relate to other people? That's our social health. And then the how and why do we exist? That is our spiritual health. So looking at this wheel, do we think that mental health is important? It is half of our wheel, right? We cannot neglect our psychological health. Sometimes we tend to put the focus on our physical health or maybe our occupational health, and we forget about the mental health side of things, but we really have to prioritize our psychological health. So we're going to look at each of those psychological health dimensions relatively quickly, starting with our intellectual health. So again, this is how do we think? So intellectual health is all about perceiving life in a realistic way, being able to adapt to change, thinking rationally and logically, and striving for growth. College is obviously a really important time for you to gain intellectual health and skills associated with intellectual health. So some things that you develop in college. You develop good study skills, good time management skills. We challenge you to see all sides of the issue and become a critical thinker. One really good way to develop intellectual health is actually to have conversations with people who are different from you, right? Have different views than you, different values from you. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to change your values or change your beliefs, but it does challenge your thinking and allow you to think a little bit more critically and be a little bit more open-minded about ideas. So now we have the emotional dimension. Okay, so this is all about how we feel. This is a little bit more tricky, right? Because this is all about feeling emotions, so feeling a wide range of emotions, but then responding in an appropriate way. So an emotionally healthy person is able to respond in a stable and appropriate way to upsetting events. They're also able to communicate and express their feelings in an appropriate way. Emotional health and social health are very closely tied because our emotions really impact our social relationships as well. Many of you have probably heard about emotional intelligence, right? So we have our IQ, but then we also have our EQ, our emotional intelligence. This talks about our social competence and our ability to understand our emotions and self-awareness, manage and control your moods. There's some research out there that says that this is actually more important to life success than your IQ. So things like your social competence and your relational success and your job success are all very, very closely tied to your emotional intelligence. The good thing is this is something you can change. So if you learn to recognize your emotions, you can learn to respond more appropriately. We are actually going to do an EQ assessment in a future class when we talk about healthy relationships, because again, it's so closely tied to your social competence that we really want to talk about this when we talk about relationships. So we'll table this for now and we'll come back to it in a few weeks when we talk about relationships. Okay, social dimension. I'm also not going to spend much time here simply because we will have a class on relationships, but when you are socially healthy, you have the ability to form strong, meaningful relationships with other people that provide you social support. Okay, so this is all about connecting with people around you, experience a sense of belonging, and having strong social connections. So our last dimension, this is the spiritual dimension. So here's the thing. Sometimes we tie this to religion, right? However, we have to understand that spirituality and religion are actually not the same thing. For some people, they're very closely tied, but when we talk about our spiritual health, we are just talking about where do we find our purpose and meaning in life, right? Every single one of you listening to me right now has a meaning of life. And when we take the time to seek that out and to find out for ourselves what that is us thinking about our spiritual health. Okay, so it's all about, again, that how and why do we exist, that meaning in life. When we take the time to develop that and we really seek out our purpose, it helps to define some other things for us. First of all, it defines our relationships. You've probably realized when you feel like you have a purpose, right, and you feel good about yourself, you're much more likely to treat someone else with respect and integrity and have a healthy relationship. So spirituality really impacts your relationships. It also impacts your values, particularly your moral values and what you choose to do. And then that third bullet point, it impacts the choices that you make. So the choices you make tend to manifest the purpose that you have set for yourself. Now, maybe you've never really thought about this question of like, why do I exist? And how do I exist? And what is my purpose in life? So there's some pretty kind of simple ways to start thinking about this, and we call these spiritual practices. They can be things like yoga, meditation, contemplation, mindfulness is a very popular practice that we talk about a lot at Wake Forest. But these are all things that can actually have really powerful impacts on your physical body. There's a very, very strong mind-body connection. So research shows when we engage in these spiritual practices, it actually helps to decrease anxiety and depression, feelings of isolation. It decreases the need for negative coping mechanisms like drug and alcohol use. Actually decreases things like your blood pressure and your risk of heart disease. There's been some research surrounding this, and it's called the relaxation response. Your body literally relaxes in response to these practices. So the study of the mind-body connection is so fascinating to me. And there's a big word for it. It's called psychoneuroimmunology. And we don't really need to know that word. But what this says is that, again, there's a really strong connection between your mind and your physical body. When you take care of your mind, you actually take care of your body. Some of the coolest research I found is that happiness, right? So what do I mean by happiness? I mean having an overall disposition of contentment. Nobody is happy 100% of the time. We know that, but this is just having that disposition. Happiness actually reduces your risk of heart disease, pulmonary disease, diabetes, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, and even things like acute colds, right? So happiness actually boosts your immune system. Really, really cool. Also, laughter. Literally taking time to laugh reduces your stress hormones. It increases your immune system, helps you to sleep better. So if you're really stressed, if you're really overwhelmed, like this is a very trying time that we're going through right now, take some time to laugh. Watch a funny video. Call a friend who makes you laugh. But find some time to laugh, and that will literally decrease those stress hormones.